Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast, episode 13. My name is Yuri and I'm joined by Keishi.
Hey Yuri, how are you today?
I am doing okay. I got my peppermint tea right here. What about you?
That's great. Yeah, I just have my water here as usual.
No coffee?
Don't drink coffee, so yeah.
Good.
And no tea because I was too lazy to make it.
Well, good, because coffee is a terrible drink. And I'm saying that live on air. Come at me, coffee industry. I still drink it, but you guys are terrible.
So what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to go into two pretty interesting topics. I think that especially beginners, any side hustle beginner will love. And it's idea versus execution. We all have ideas in our heads, but then doing something about it is a different story. And then speed versus perfection, whether either you do work sloppy fast or are you the type of person that wants to get every little thing right before you launch your product out.
And I guess we're going to try to find where the right balance between those two pairs of seemingly opposite things are.
And let's start with idea versus execution.
Yeah, this is what I'm pretty interested in general, because I think you see a lot of people that spend a lot of time planning things, and they seem to be doing a great job with planning, but then they never actually end up executing things, which essentially makes the planning useless, right? Because unless you execute on something, then what is the planning for? And I think especially for people that are just getting started with whether it's creating a side hustle or some sort of online business in general or whatever it might be, like it can be hard to know when you're actually ready to do something rather than still having the need to be planning what to do, right? Because sometimes it's really hard to tell, I think. Yeah, so sometimes it's really hard to figure out when to stop planning and when to stop just thinking about ideas and when to go into execution. What do you think? Is there any guiding principle that people can kind of follow when it comes to this? Or
I'm not sure how much of a balance it would be. From the beginner's perspective, I think a lot of people are more so stuck in the idea or planning phase versus the actual execution phase. I don't know how much. I think the balance is an important balance to strike once you have a grasp on both, especially on execution. But I think in the case of a beginner, it's like less so balance, more execution first, getting used to doing the actual action. And then you can worry about the planning a bit later.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think in the beginning, it's just important to just get going and kind of just let things sort themselves out.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I feel like, especially in the beginning, and I guess it was the same case with myself and probably you in some of the cases too, but it's really hard to just pick an idea and get committed to it, right? Like, let's say you want to start a YouTube channel about I don't know, about dogs, but then you suddenly see a book on your table, so you might go like, oh, or maybe I should start a YouTube channel about books instead of dogs, and you just get caught in this place where you're just constantly going from idea to idea to idea, and you feel like you're doing things, you feel like you're just thinking about what to start and you're planning things, but you're really kind of just
you're living in your head.
Yeah, and you're in one place, right? You haven't moved an inch forward.
Yeah,
you just keep spinning in circle.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree that in the beginning, it's important to get going, but it's also probably the most difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I think in the case of our blogs, it's probably second nature for us to go to like a hosting site, buy.com. install WordPress, and we're there in 10 minutes or something, or however long it takes to make the purchase. But for someone else that hasn't really thought about or hasn't done it before, it's a lot harder for them. And they don't know. I guess the biggest hurdle is you're kind of stepping off of a cliff in a way because you don't know what's happening on the other side. Whereas in our case, we did it's again, I'm only saying stepping off of a cliff because in general, all new things for us is scary to do. I know the point is starting a blog isn't exactly a big deal, but for someone who's new and they have to throw down money on it and they don't know what's coming up next, maybe they have to learn how to code, and suddenly, there's a lot of vagueness and ambiguity there that kind of scares them. So to that extent, I do agree. That's why the unknown makes it hard.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's also what do you call it? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Where you want to start something, but then you're like, yeah, I'm not good enough to start this, or or yeah, why should I be the one writing about dogs? Where there's people that studied dogs at university for 4 years or for 5 years, for 6 years. There's all these moments where you kind of doubt yourself, and then you use that as a thing that stops you from actually doing thing. And again, you just stay in this one spot trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Whereas all you really got to do is just take the first step and just kind of correct the course later on.
Yeah, but that's the hardest step to take. I think we can all agree on that part. Although it's a necessary step. It's like without that step, there's nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think are some of the things where people get stuck the most in terms of like, rather than executing, rather than doing what moves the needle? And I think we're kind of, to an extent, we're also going into the speed versus perfection thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think are some of the things where people get stuck the most commonly when they're trying to get started? Like what sort of things that don't really move the needle in the beginning, but that kind of feel good, I guess, to do, or that feel productive, but are not necessarily productive? What do you think are some of the most common ones?
Like your logo or the design of your website, even though you're not getting any traffic, you want to make it look just right. Or your name, like what should I call my product, or what should I call my site? What should I call my blog? They spend a lot of time thinking about it. I mean, yeah, the name is important as long as it does require a bit of thought, but it's not. And I think some things, maybe you should put a time cap, a limit on how much time you should actually invest in it, and just like seal the deal and move on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think name is a bit, name is a difficult one, because like once you set the name, it's pretty hard to change it, especially like let's say grow a blog under an old name, and it's always a bit of a risk to move it to a new domain. Like sometimes it might work out without any hitch, otherwise you might lose half your traffic. And so it's always good to get the name right in the beginning, but at the same time it can take you forever still, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about what you build around the name rather than what is the name by itself. Like nobody would know Nike if they haven't sold millions of shoes, and it's not about the name, it's about what the company did to give the meaning to its name, right? So even the name, I think you're right. I think overthinking it is definitely not good. But yeah, I love just saying logo, because I think we're similar in this, but probably half of my blogs don't have logo, and the other half, the logo is essentially a text with a bit of graphic elements, I guess you could say, but it's nothing breathtaking.
Yeah.
But it works, right? And I feel like a lot of people just feel like unless they have the perfect logo, then their business is never going to take off. What do you think? Do you think that's what happens to quite a few people out there?
I always feel like you can always adjust your logo later on. Yeah, I do think people would get stuck over that. In my again, like with the sites, I don't have logos at all. I guess I'm not in the branding game, but I feel like if you have a recognizable name at some point, if your blog gets traction or your product or whatnot, and you have a logo that you're not satisfied with, I mean, like, what is a brand ultimately? Like you said, it's like an overall collective of how much you did, how much you sold, what you're known for. I think changing a logo is just a minor blip on the map. But then again, I'm no branding expert, so I would just, if I had a crappy logo, came time to have a better logo, I'll just find a better logo.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. I think like once you actually start building the site, and let's say you want to go from just having Google traffic to actually building an email list and building an audience and things like that, that's where I think these things actually are important, right? And you should be executing on them, and you should be trying to perfect them essentially. But if you're just starting and you have 0 people coming to your website, then who really cares about your logo?
Yeah, no one's really looking at your logo in the first place to care about it. And no one's going to be like, oh, like your first visitor to the site or your 10th visitor to the site, they won't be like, oh, look at that great logo. But I don't think people care that much. It only matters like in hindsight, way, way later on, where you kind of want to go for brand recognition. If you're like on a shelf with Lawson and you want your product to be picked out over the other product. But there's also an element of overthinking about it. Like, like overthinking, whereas the average consumer probably doesn't think at all about the brand logo. They're just there like, I want the product. And and eventually you kind of want to give them something that's recognizable. Yeah, and
I think, to be fair, it also kind of depends on what business model you're going for, right? So if you're just starting a blog where you want to make money through ads or through affiliates or whatever, then probably doesn't matter too much. Now, if you're starting a freelance designer career or something, then you probably better have a pretty good logo, right? If what you're trying to sell is design.
Yeah.
Or similar, like if you want to have a physical product, then you want to have it on shelves in some stores, then the design of course matters as well. The packaging and everything related to that is very, very important in the kind of in the physical retail business, right? But if you're just starting a side hustle and the only thing that's holding you back from turning your idea into an actual thing is the lack of a perfect logo, then that's probably not the right thing to focus on.
Yeah, because it's not going to get the needle moving. If anything, it's just putting out products.
Yeah. So to kind of take this ideas versus execution topic a step back, I guess when I initially thought of this, my original idea was discussing placing too much sort of focus on the idea versus focus on the execution, right? You have people that believe that ideas are what make the business, and then you have people who believe that execution is what makes the business.
Mm-hmm.
On kind of a higher level, right? So like you have people that go like, oh my God, Uber is $1 billion company now. I had this exact same idea like 10 years ago, if I only did it. Like on that sort of level, what's your thoughts on kind of the idea versus execution?
That's a good question. I wouldn't, in the grand scheme of all things, I would say the most dangerous man is the person that can do both, have the idea and execute on it. And by dangerous, I just mean like, person that can get stuff done and go places. I think that's what you kind of want to aim for.
Yeah, I think if you have both, that's excellent, because then you're going to build a Facebook, then you're going to build the next Amazon or whatever it might be. But at the same time, I think at like the lower level, if you're not aiming to become like a multi-billion-dollar company or something, then I'd say that execution is much more important than an idea. Mm-hmm. Like you still have to have an idea, right? And it can be a bad idea, but it doesn't have to be an excellent idea.
Yeah. Well, that I agree with.
There are so many businesses out there that are just not new ideas, right? It's like there's new restaurants popping out every day. Well, maybe now it requires some innovation because of coronavirus and stuff. But yeah, there's still restaurants popping out. There's like dry cleaners. There's supermarkets. Like these are not new. These are not new ideas, and there's still businesses being built every day around them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big believer in execution over ideas.
I like both. I don't see it as I understand the need for that. Humans are more wired towards thinking versus doing because we're lazy on some level. I think like we naturally are inclined to overthink. So that's why I think there's a stronger need. You need a stronger need to push towards execution. And yeah, like I don't think you need a super unique thing or like a super unique idea. Like, actually the funny thing is like when I would recommend someone to start a blog, which I shouldn't do, their first reaction is like, but what should I write about? Like, I need an idea. What do I do? And like, they kind of get caught over that idea. Like they're stuck in that idea phase. Yeah. What do I pick? What do I do? And if I tell them pick something you like, but there's so many blogs around it, how will I ever compete?
Yeah, I see that a lot. I had a friend who wanted to start a blog, and then like every time he chooses a topic, just goes out there and Googles a couple of searches related to the topic, right? Mm-hmm. And realizes there's like 10 other blogs covering the same thing, and that discourages him. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. And to me, that just doesn't make sense, because it's like, yeah, there's always going to be competition. If there's no competition, then there's probably no market. Mm-hmm. Would be my view on this. And then if you can't go out there and beat your competition, then you probably shouldn't be trying to start a business, right?
Yeah. Or if the competition bothers you.
There's always a way to either find a new angle on something, or just to like go around the thing and do something slightly different that makes you unique. So yeah, I think being too keen on having like a unique idea, having an original idea that nobody has ever done before, I think it's more counterproductive than productive in the vast amount, in the vast majority of times.
You bring up a good point, because like there'll be times where I will go on like a blog hiatus where I haven't posted much, and one of the easiest things for me to do is like, instead of trying to think, like if I'm trying to get back into it, I don't think about what's a new thing that I could post about. I go for what can I replicate just to get word going again, just to get it going and get the content, get the blood flowing, get back in motion. So I don't think of a new idea. I think like, what else can I do that I have already done that's similar? and it just makes it better or easier for me to get back into publishing.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes you just got to copy your competition because maybe you're going to be better at it slightly, and you're just going to push them out of the market, or you're going to get the higher spot in Google or something. So I think automatically giving up because there's somebody else doing the exact same thing, or what seems like the exact same thing, just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just to give you an example, like I recently just went through all the websites that essentially I believe I'm competing with, and I just made a long list of articles, because you can essentially go to their sitemap and just download the list of all the articles that they have. And I went through like 20 competitors, and I just created a long list. And eventually I'm just going to publish everything they published. And eventually my site's going to be bigger.
And now you have a big list of things to do.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually my site's going to be bigger than any single one of the 20 sites, right? If I publish everything that the 20 competitors published, plus extra stuff on top of that, then I should become the biggest in that group, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think competition is a bad thing. I think it's something that you should aim to beat, and something that should motivate you to an extent.
Yeah, or use it for inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. Just look for your competition and look for the articles they have, or look for the videos they have, or whatever it is that you're doing. Look at the products that they have, and just think how you could change one or two small things to make it better. And then that's all it takes to. And that's all it takes on the idea side, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then it just execution. Now you still have to look back and reconsider sometimes, but
just to go back to the idea part, I still think, yeah, like you said, execution is important, because if you have the habit of execution and you've been pumping out ideas, right? Let's say you have no habit of execution, and you have a really good idea, then that good idea is dead in the water. It's never going to come out. But if you have the habit and you've already been pumping out bad ideas, I think a lot of creative people struggle with like putting out bad work. But if you are in the habit of creating and publishing bad work, I wouldn't do this on a professional level, I guess, but like on my own side hustle level, I'm a big fan of publishing bad work. By bad work, I mean like get it done, right? And then worry about fixing it up later.
Good enough. Yeah, I'd call it good enough, not bad.
Like I'll put out a blog post, and like maybe I'll find that there's a typo in there. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll fix it on later on. But the whole point is like it's better to get it done and fix it than like never get it out the gate. But if you don't have that habit that you can only accumulate through publishing just work, whether it's good or bad, by the time that really good idea comes along, and if you don't have that habit, then you're not going to have that really good idea in action.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is when you try to kind of filter your own ideas, and of course you shouldn't be putting everything out there, and but still trying to filter your own ideas too much is like it's not like what you like is also what somebody else likes, right? So you might have 10 ideas and hate 8 of those and like 2 of them. It might just as well be that the vast majority of your audience actually likes one of the 8 that you don't like.
Yeah.
Which is why I think which is one of the reasons I think it's important to just keep putting stuff out just to get the feedback. And the other thing is just to go back to what you were saying about kind of having the habit of executing your ideas, is that I think unless you actually execute on something, you can never know yourself whether an idea is good or bad. You will always have a theory, right?
Yeah.
But you will never know. It's like,
I think, and that's what there's
it's like being an armchair. What do you call it?
Analyst? Armchair analyst?
Armchair. Yeah, maybe that's the right word. It's essentially just being like just being a guy that thinks he knows but doesn't really know. It's almost like what we were talking about, knowing versus understanding last week or 2 weeks ago or something. It just you can't fully understand these things unless you actually do them.
Yeah. There's another interesting point that you made me think of, was if you do filter out, well, on the topic of filtering out your work or not filtering out your work, you have to let the audience decide.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the magical part, essentially, of putting out work, is because you'll never know. Your greatest idea can flop and something super simple can take off, but you will never know. 1, you will never know, and 2, that's like the fun magic of it. What if you keep churning out stuff, and then suddenly you realize, oh, wow, this one thing that I didn't really think of, or I didn't think too much of, is suddenly doing quite well.
Yeah, and I think that's what sort of requires a mindset shift, especially for like somebody that's used to more traditional business models, I guess, compared to like the online business models. is because like if you think about the traditional publishing model, right? You have to find an agent, and you have to find a publisher, and you have to write a long proposal, and then it has to go through like dozens of gatekeepers, and then it becomes a book. And there's a good reason for that. Like you can't just take any random piece of writing and publish it in a book form, in a printed book form, because it just costs so much money and resources, right? It's like, if you're gonna do a print book, at least in the traditional publishing sense, you're committing yourself to like hundreds of thousands of copies, right? So you can't publish hundreds of thousands of things not knowing how it's going to perform, or not at least having a rough idea of how it's going to perform. But with like a blog or with YouTube, all that happens is you just publish it there, and either nobody sees it, in which case, who cares, because nobody sees it, right?
Yeah.
Or people actually like it, and people are the ones that are actually the gatekeeper, right? Maybe somebody shares it, maybe somebody likes it, maybe somebody follows you, and it's whoever's viewing the things that gets to decide what they want to see. So I think that's essentially the biggest reason to me why it's more important to be executing, because then the good ideas will just kind of filter themselves out, right?
Do you have any like projects inside your side hustles that kind of bubbled up to the top that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so this is not necessarily related to side hustles per se, but like the Facebook page that I run together with my aviation blog, now it's kind of neglected, but anyways, like I would literally never know which things would be popular and which things wouldn't, and sometimes it makes sense. It's like, oh, I really like this photo, and I share it, and oh, people like it too. But other times it's like, oh, this is a mediocre photo with like a mediocre message, and like it's the one that the most people look at. Yeah, so I think again, there's always cases where you don't know, but and to me it's more about like, what's the worst case that can happen, right? It's like the worst that can happen is nobody sees it. In a year, nobody's going to remember that you posted this really unmemorable piece of content, right? Who has time to remember unmemorable things? Like, just doesn't make sense. So why not put it out and see if somebody actually likes it?
That's a good point.
How about you? Do you have any examples?
I guess it was just with my language blogs, like you can ultimately see what works through Google Analytics, what kind of topics get a lot of traffic. I went by volume, I churned out a lot of work, and then like a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, I'd go through Google Analytics and be like, oh, wow, I didn't expect this to surge. And that's the stuff you can't really know ahead of time. That's the stuff you can only know in hindsight, or you start seeing results on it. And like a similar case, I guess, with social media, I use Pinterest, or have used Pinterest a lot, just to like post the pictures from the blogs on there.
Yeah.
And I guess it was just through experimentation that I noticed just some things just started getting picked up. Like really text heavy images, big images get a lot of traction on Pinterest, but it's something I would have never known if I hadn't posted it. And then just going through my history and be like, all right, this kind of worked out well. Let me do more of that. And the whole point is, well, in my case, the point of these pictures is just to get people to click through, and hopefully they land on the blog and whatever and capture them. But again, this is the stuff like either I just post a random picture that's like 300 by 300, or I finally realized through just testing and doing a lot of work that like all the tall pictures, like, I don't know, like the height is 900 pixels. Those tend to do quite well, especially if there's text on there and looks informative. But again, so I guess the whole point is that you wouldn't know this stuff if you hadn't done it. And if you don't have like a database of data to look at, or just a history of work to look at to see what performed. Yeah,
exactly. And when you talked about the SEO, it just reminded me about Google Analytics and looking at what content performs better. Actually, it reminded me that I have probably dozens of examples from my own things. Is like every time I post an article, I expect some sort of traffic, right? Like you were just saying. But like there are so many cases where the traffic that I expect and the traffic that actually comes, it is just completely off. Like sometimes it's like I expect this article to perform well, but nobody comes. But a lot of times it's like I expect this article to get whatever, like 200 views a month or something. And it starts getting like 2,000 views a month. And like, if I was like, oh yeah, this article's only going to get 200 views a month, I'm not going to post it because nobody's going to be looking at it, then I would never have gotten those kind of hidden winners or whatever you want to call them, right? Yeah, and there's always a balance. Like you can't just go out there and start posting everything because maybe something will stick to the wall. But at the same time, you can't just snipe, right? You have to throw a couple of things at the wall to see which one sticks. But at the same time, you can't just be throwing like crazy.
It's the good old throw spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Wise saying, I think.
Yeah, but don't throw too many spaghettis too. Yeah, and before we go to the next topic, I just want to mention like I was helping this guy a while back with researching some stuff for, like, he was thinking of trying to start a business in a couple of different areas, and he was kind of trying to figure out which ones to start in. And it's not like any of those ideas were anything groundbreaking, right? But then at some point he's like, oh, can we sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, covering everything we talk about? And I'm like, yes, sorry. I just, like, of course, if he like reveals his financials to me, or if he's actually committed to one idea and he is putting a lot of money into it or something like that, I have no problem signing it, right? Because it's not like I just want to go out there and steal his idea or anything. But at the same time, like, when he's trying to decide from 10 ideas, none of which are like necessarily unique, then like, why would I sign an NDA? I just told him, yeah, sorry, I just value execution more than ideas. So unless you actually decide to move with one of these forward and then I'm helping you in one way or another, then I'm not going to sign an NDA. And he was like, yeah, but I studied a lot of these things, and like companies like Apple and Facebook and so on, a lot of it was the idea. I'm like, okay, good luck. There's not much more I can say to that.
So he was scared that you were going to take his idea?
I think so. To me, it doesn't make sense, because if you have an idea and you're so confident in the idea, then to me, that's just half of the equation, right? You also got to be confident in the execution, and that somebody else with the same idea or similar idea is not going to put you out of business, right? So like, just having a good idea is just half the equation for me. It's like having the raw materials, but then not having an oven or something to make the cake in.
He's afraid that you might take his idea, but the amount of work, money, time investment that it requires to put an idea into action, I think that dissuades a lot of people. Sure, like a Fortune 500 company with the resources can probably easily swipe an idea, but like in all other cases, it's time consuming. Why would you want to spend your time on someone else's idea when you have your own ideas?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to go back to the Uber example I mentioned earlier, it's like, how many people told to themselves that after Uber became big, it's like, how many people told themselves, oh, I had this exact same idea like 10 years ago. And what is it good for? It's nothing. Just useless, just piece of useless information, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of similar with like, I think trading is a good example of this, or like investing. And I'm not a fan of trading, because I think eventually most traders lose, but they feel very confident while they're winning. Think of trades, right? Like, if you bought Tesla a year ago, you'd probably be pretty rich right now. But like it's not the idea of buying Tesla that would have made you the money. It would have been actually putting the money into the Tesla stock that would have made you the money, right? And there were probably 50 different stocks that would have given you the same return. But if you just sit and didn't put a single dollar into a single stock, then you just stop at the idea, and really there's no value in you knowing that, oh, Tesla would have gone up, right?
I guess whoever is listening now, I hope we got through to them that, ideas only go so far without the actual action, and no one's really going to steal your idea, because ideas take time, money, resources, and whatnot to implement. Maybe a big company or someone with a lot of resources can, but for the most part, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I take it a step further. I think if they want to steal your idea, let them steal it. Just be better. Like, eventually, if you build something of value, people are going to want to copy it, and then it's just up to you to actually defend it and grow it further, I think.
Yeah, but that's like 10,000 miles down the road, far from a side hustle. At that point, it's probably your own company or something.
Yeah, could be at various levels, but yeah, probably down the road. because I think that's the other thing that is probably stopping a lot of people from doing things and keeps them at the planning phase or the idea phase is that like once you actually commit to executing something and it doesn't work out, it can feel like, oh, I wasted all this time or all this money. Like, I mean, I'm sure you spent some money on articles that never got any traffic. I spent money on articles and on a bunch of other stuff that never gave me any sort of ROI. Again, and I think once you actually commit to executing something, that's the risk, right? Like you throw $1,000 at something, you throw $5,000 at something, you spend 100 hours executing something, and then it doesn't bring you any return, and it hurts. Whereas if you spend 100 hours just planning things, then chances are you'll just be like, oh, okay, so this is not a good idea. I will never do it. And you don't do it. It just stays an idea forever. And it doesn't feel like you wasted anything, but you still wasted the same 100 hours.
Yeah.
It just feels like you didn't waste anything because you're telling yourself you didn't waste time because you figured out it's not a good idea to do. Yeah. So to me, it almost feels like just staying at the idea phase versus the execution phase. It's almost like a defense mechanism where if you stay in the idea phase, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
Whereas once you actually go out on the field, then you're exposing yourself. It's like with sports, right? Like not like I'm good at any sports, but I can only imagine like if you practice, but never step onto the field for an actual match, then you feel good about yourself practicing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you step on the field to actually go for an actual match, then you always have the risk of losing. And if you lose, it's probably not a happy moment, right?
Yeah. That's where you kind of learn more about yourself and where you need to go.
Exactly. It's important. And you can't improve yourself without actually stepping on the field and without winning a match or losing a match.
Yeah.
You can't just keep practicing forever by yourself or just with your team, right? And to me, this is the exact same thing. It's like, sure, you can improve your idea by thinking about it, but you will never completely polish it up without actually going out there and starting to work on it, even if it's going to be rough in the beginning.
So I guess this perfectly segues into the next part of the podcast is speed versus perfection. So at which point should you worry about how perfect, we were just talking about practice. And why do people practice? Well, they just want to get things done right and perfect before they actually put the work out into the world. Whereas sometimes maybe it's more important to have speed and just publish things fast, put things out fast, execute fast instead of trying to make everything perfect. So what are your thoughts on that? Speed versus perfection?
Yeah, my first thought would be it's a balance and it depends. And I don't think there's such a thing as perfection, right? Everything can always be more perfect than it is. Everything can always be improved. Like there's very few things that are just finished. Like there's always going to be the next MacBook. There's always going to be a new book about something. There's always going to be new research about a certain topic. Like things are never finished. So why not actually start now? Start doing something now. But to me, the main thing here is everybody has some sort of runway, right? It's like if you're starting something, and if you're putting time into it, then obviously we're all gonna die one day, right? So that's sort of limit on the time part. But if you're also investing some money into a thing, like if you're trying to start a blog, but you're also, rather than just writing everything yourself, you're hiring writers or whatever, then you have some sort of runway, right? Like whether that's a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, there's some sort of limit to how far can you go before this thing takes off. So I think that's one of the factors that should kind of help you determine like how perfect do you want to be. It's like if you have $1 million to spend to get a blog off the ground, then probably spending $5,000 on creating the perfect logo and choosing the perfect theme and whatever it is, it's probably no big deal because you have $1 million to start this business with. But if you're trying to start a side hustle, then the chances are your budget is probably much lower, and you also have much more limited amount of time, right? And in that case, I think it's much more important to focus on what really, really moves the needle.
Yeah, putting out work.
Exactly. Which in case of YouTube, it's videos. In case of blog, it's articles. In case of whatever, Amazon FBA, it's probably creating a product.
In the case of music, it's music.
Yeah, we're pretty good at at finding these combinations. But yeah, like seriously, I mean, perfection is good, but you can never be perfect. So I think just within the limitations, whether it's your time constraints or budget constraints, just do the best you can, but don't overdo it.
I think there's a kind of a balance, or I guess that there's a time and place for everything. And perfection is, I think, less important when you are doing a side hustle, when you're doing a blog or a YouTube channel. Because, like, again, you don't have a big audience. No one really cares. And at that point, your job is to only gain traction. Whereas, like, if you're a big brand and then people are suddenly watching, you have like millions of eyeballs, and you make a mistake, then at that point, you know, if they find a typo in your logo or something, at that point, it will matter. But, you know, but the whole point is that point is so far off from anyone that's doing a side hustle that it doesn't really matter. It only, I guess it matters more the bigger you are.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So I guess a lot of what I'm talking about, and also a lot of what you're talking about, is from the point of view of starting a side hustle, or starting an online business, or starting something that's yours and something that's small, right? So we're not talking about starting the next airline or going to the space or anything like that here. And I think that's a key distinction to keep in mind. It's like, of course, if you're a doctor, then you have to be much closer to the perfection than to speed.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, right? Like, let's take the doctor example. Like, perfection would be taking you to the operating room and doing everything like step by step, and like doing the most ideal procedure. But then sometimes there's no time for that, right? Sometimes your leg gets broken on the summit of Mount Everest, and there's just no time to get you to the hospital to get you the proper treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, the speed is probably important, and it's probably not going to be as perfect as it would have been if you could have gotten to the hospital first. But they still got to treat you the best possible way they can with the resources.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if you're on a plane and you need attention.
Yeah, exactly. That's another great example. Like, if somebody faints on a plane and they look for a doctor, then even a dentist is probably better than like a lawyer or an accountant.
What about an armchair analyst that happens to be on the plane?
Yeah,
that has read a lot of medical articles.
You just hope he doesn't raise his hand.
Yeah.
but
do we have a doctor on the plane? No analysts, by the way, no armchair analysts. Please sit back down.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, there's never such thing as perfect, right? And you just got to do the best thing possible with the amount of resources that you have. And a matter of fact is that if you're trying to start a side hustle, then you're probably busy with your actual day job, so you don't have much time. And you're also probably on a fairly limited budget, right?
Yeah.
So why spend a lot of your time and a lot of your budget on trying to make your site look perfect and having the perfect logo, when there's so many sites without even a logo that make thousands of dollars a month, or even tens of thousands of dollars a month? Like, it's just a matter of prioritization to me. Yeah, and again, it really depends on what you're trying to build. Like, if you're trying to build yourself a personal brand where you're branding yourself as the web designer of the 21st century, or the proofreader, then you probably want to make sure you put enough effort into that rather than into the quantity of the content. But if you're trying to start a site that makes money based on the volume of visitors that come to your site through Google or something, then you probably want to produce more content, right?
Yeah. And like, there's that whole quantity versus quality argument. I think you will find more quality by going through quantity. Quality builds up with more quantity.
Yeah, you will, but there's got to be some sort of baseline, right? And I think that's the thing, that the baseline really depends on what you're going after. It depends on the outcome. Like, if you want to be the best rated proofreader on Upwork, then don't send me an application for an editor position that's got 7 typos in 2 sentences. Like, that's a real case example.
The way that specific example, it sounds like you had some experience with that.
Yeah, and you see a lot of that, right? It's like people apply for a writing job and their application is written like some elementary school kid wrote it. Or people apply for a graphic design job and the portfolio they send you is a bunch of
Microsoft Word images.
Yeah, a bunch of not so nice graphics, to be polite, right? And so it really depends. Like, like to go back to the quality versus quantity. Like, if you want to be a freelancer and you want to be a graphic designer, then I'd say the quality versus quantity goes to like sales pitches. But in terms of your portfolio, it's better to have like 2 pieces of work that are solid than like 10 that are mediocre. And then put all your efforts into like trying to find clients. Whereas if you're trying to start a blog, then probably the quality of any individual article, of course it has to be decent, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right?
Doesn't have to be perfect. I take that down to my own blogs. Like, sure, I'll run the text through Grammarly to catch most typos, but I've found typos afterwards, like a year later on or a day later. But the reason why I moved on with it is just like it's something that's not going to move the needle right now, and something that will get fixed eventually. But the whole point is it's better to get it out and open rather than have it sit behind a locked door and never come out, never publish your work. But I am also guilty on this. In the speed of perfection, like there's the one project that I always wanted to do that I'm really slacking on is the whole comedy scripts. Like I have a lot of scripts written up. Like, and I think the writing part in some way is very important, but it's also kind of also a planning part. And thus far I've only put out one, and like I only put out one because I did it with a friend. It was easy to do.
Yeah.
But now that it's passed on to me, it's like it's harder because it's like, So it also depends when and where. Like some things that we're used to, we can easily pump out content. Some things that we're not used to and are completely different, it's a bit harder.
The focus should still be putting out the content, right? Even if it's hard for you.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it's 2 articles a month or 2 videos a week or whatever it is, like more is always better.
Yeah.
Unless the quality starts suffering like a lot. But I think that's rarely the case. I think what's more likely the case is that you're either trying to make the article too perfect, which is what's slowing you down. Like rather than spending 4 hours on an article, you're spending 8 hours just to make it like 99% rather than like 80%.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. And the other one is just focusing on the wrong thing. So like you're starting a blog and rather than creating 2 articles, you create 1 article and then spend the time you could have created the next article. You spend that time perfecting your logo or choosing which shade of orange goes best with your blue color in your logo or something. Like something that's essentially useless at that point.
And the other way to look at it is if you publish 2 articles, let's say you published 1 article and you are now obsessing over your logo. Let's say that article ranks and let's say it's bringing you like, 10 visits a week. But let's say you went the not so perfect route and you published 3 articles and both of them get 10 a week. You would have had more traffic on your site overall if you publish those pieces of work rather than getting stuck with one or putting out one and getting stuck over a logo.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I believe in compounding, and to compound, I believe you have to do as much as possible of the thing that moves the needle, right? Because the more things you do that move the needle, the more those things then keep moving it even after you're done with them. Like let's say you write an article, that article will keep getting you traffic for quite a long time, which means that every day you spend not publishing an article, you're losing something, right?
Yeah. I take that concept to the gym every day. Well, I can't really go to the gym because of the whole Corona situation. But like I kind of felt the same concept every day that I missed or skipped. I was kind of losing today, and whatever foundation today would be used for tomorrow. And that's hard to calculate, but it's also I think it's an immense loss too.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And I think it's a good closing thought for this podcast is at some point, there's going to be a point in time when probably upgrading your logo or upgrading the user experience slightly or something will move the needle more than a single new article. But it's definitely not that in the beginning, right? So
Definitely.
you just always kind of gotta just think, let's say I publish an extra article and that will bring me extra 10 visitors a month, or I change the logo and maybe that will make the visitors stay like 0.05% longer on my site. But that only matters once you have a lot of traffic, right? So it's finding the balance, and it's always just essentially it's always focusing on what moves the needle, but realizing that what moves the needle today is not what will move the needle tomorrow.
It's a good way to end it. What moves the needle today doesn't mean it's going to move the needle tomorrow.
And what moves the needle for us is not what moves the needle for somebody else. So it's always just knowing your business, knowing what's the focus of it, and knowing what's the main thing that drives the traffic to it, or that drives the visitors, subscribers, or whatever it might be that you're going after.
Guys, we hope you enjoyed this 13th episode of the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast, idea versus execution and speed versus perfection. By the way, if you do want to start your own blog and you want to jump in and start executing on your ideas, definitely check out the show notes at sidehustlesandstuff.com/E13, and find the link for Bluehost. Bluehost is a hosting service where you can buy a .com and get started on your own blog or website and start putting out your ideas into the world. And also check out the show notes for all the things that we mentioned today. I think we mentioned some things today that could go in there. If not, well, that's good enough, because it's speed versus perfection, and we'd rather get this out. This has been the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast with Keishi and Yuri.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.